Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the High Dragon's Breath. Bow wow, welcoming you back to more Archon's Armory. Now, as previously mentioned, we are on a track towards one of the most requested videos of the series. Not something I intended to release so lightly, but I suppose today's upload will tee us up for the Bolter's introduction into the Mythos. So without further ado, let's get light body armor into the Mythos. The Mythos. So we have our lovely meme here. This is one of those that has some good layman's comedy around it. Now, the t-shirt, I have heard this concept come from experienced players and friendly storesmen alike. T-shirt saves, they call it. The 5 up on the tabletop, and the standard Imperial Guard flak breastplate, shoulder plate, and helmet in lore. Now, apart from what the meme may tell you, T-shirt save is far from reality, as of course 6-up saves do exist on the tabletop, and much worse protection can be sourced than the flak armor of the Imperial Guard. Second is lives not worth saving. Now this is often a concept that certain, I hate to say Space Marine players hold, but really it doesn't belong to any other faction. A majority of those who play elite armies view the Imperial Guard as little more than meat shields. Pathetic little mortals who do very little and die while doing so. Now, obviously, the Imperial Guard are the premier Imperial force that faces a majority of the Imperium's enemies at any one time. And lives not worth saving hardly applies to a soldier whose gear, equipment, weaponry, and training is so expensive for the Adeptus Munitorum. And finally, it's all the same. Now, there is a strong belief amongst many players that there is no difference between one Imperial Guardsman's protection and another's. And I am here to explain that light, medium, and heavy body armor are all very different. Moving on from the Mythos, as this will be a thing we come back to in this video several times. The reality of light body armor. Kinetic versus energy weapons. In terms of protection, the light body armor of the Imperium really boils down to the flak breastplate, or the flak armor. There are several different types, but in general they do about equal in terms of energy and kinetic protection. In terms of kinetics, they are usually covered with either a material covering, usually this is ceramite, though with the lighter flak armor and the flak plates, they tend to be just a Kevlar equivalent. Now, Kevlar is quite effective against bullets, and can stop autogun, hardgun, and shotgun rounds with relative regularity. Not a guarantee that you'll be uninjured, but at least a very high chance of your survival, as opposed to unprotectedly getting shot with a kinetic round. Energy weapons, on the other hand, some might assume would do more to flak armor, but consider it like this. The laser of the lasgun has to penetrate an external face and then dig its way through layers and layers of non-reactive material in order to hit anything that its laser can excite and detonate. Remember, a majority of the lasgun's damage is going to be as a result of hitting flesh, blood, water that it can expand and explode. The flak armor of the Imperial Guard is very much not going to be immune to weaponry so much as it will save your life. It will protect you from the unfortunate stray round. It will keep you alive after an unlucky glancing blow. It will protect you from death in the most unfortunate of circumstances. Granted, even after a single or several shots from any kinetic or energy weapon, a standard flak breastplate will probably need full-on replacement, as a laser or several bullets will literally destroy the armor. It will burn, it will melt, it will break as it is penetrated. Now, affordability and simplicity. This is one of the major advantages, and we'll get to that in a second, but the flak armor and other light armor, such as cultist steel plate armor, is very cheap and very simple. It really requires no more technology than the ability to weave cloth, since it is essentially some sort of heavy fiber weaved or woven behind a metal or ceramite backing, and fronting, of course. So, the light armor of the Imperium is eminently affordable and remarkably simple, especially on the lower ends. Cultists, for example, will get their hands on all types of raw metal armor, and will often use them to more or less effect. Moving on. Weight, standards, and replacement. As I said, flak armor requires replacement basically whenever it gets hit, because it is made of that, covered Kevlar material, layers and layers of woven material designed to catch bullets and slow down thermal rounds like las bolts. They're not really designed to sustain multiple hits at one time or with a consistent level of protection. They're going to need replacement essentially upon getting hit. So if you get struck with a las bolt in the chest and you're wearing flak armor, it's going to burn a hole in the armor and massively weaken the rest of it. This happens with Kevlar plates very often in our world, when you have a bullet that strikes the Kevlar and damages the interconnectedness of the weave. Because the Kevlar is designed to, join together and be intertwined and resist kinetic forces, the same exact thing happens when you burn through the Kevlar as when it gets hit by a bullet. It pulls strings out of place, it damages the overall armor, and as a result, it's going to need replacement. Luckily, it's cheap and easy to replace. Standards. There are a couple of standards on the Chaos side of things, and on the, cheaper PDF side of things. You'll see steel body armor a lot. This is a lot closer to the analogous, steel plates that you see in our modern day, with a plate carrier, or even a breastplate, like old-fashioned knight armor from Ancient Terra. This makes it kind of different. Flak armor, normally, the Kevlar, the Imperial Guard, covered flak armor, is way lighter than the standard, plates of today's world. But steel armor that cultists might wear is going to be even heavier than old-fashioned plate armor, because it tends to be thicker, more inconsistent, and made of, plasteel. It's not very perfect. It's kind of stamped into position. So, moving on. Beauty, form factor, and training. In my opinion, the t-shirt, the Imperial Guard standard flak armor, is a beautiful piece of equipment. When combined with a helmet like this gentleman has here, it is gorgeous. It protects his shoulders, his back, his chest, and his diaphragm. So this covers much of your internal organs except for your intestines, which, if we're being honest, you are likely going to survive a gut shot in 40k, because if it doesn't kill you outright, it's not hitting any lethal organs, not hitting your lungs, your heart, your spine, your upper spine at least, and it's probably going to have a difficulty outright killing you in one shot. The point of flak armor, again, is to save your life. It's to keep you from getting killed with a single las round to the chest. It saves your life. It's essentially a second chance to not get hit next time. In my opinion, that's beautiful, and it's very well cut. It's organized so that it can be of different strength levels while still being very mobile and remarkably light. And training-wise, it almost requires very little training, especially the steel plates that cultists use, and the face plates and the armor that cultists use will be basically just lopped onto whoever can carry it, whereas the flak armor is going to be, maybe you might need to be trained in how to maintain it, but other than that, it's going to be very much intuitive on when to wear your armor. So, the pros and cons of light body armor. So here, we have kind of the three types of armor that I'm going to be talking about. In the upper corner here, you have various levels of steel plate. For light armor, I would say that these range anywhere between 10 millimeters of plasteel and 15 millimeters of plasteel. Anything above that is likely going to be a little bit heavier. So that is the cultist standard. That is the equipment of people who don't really have infantry body armor in mind, and they definitely don't have the ability to produce it. So this is like cheap, stamped out of steel. You could build these on many worlds. Even a planet that has very little industry will likely be able to churn out square steel plates of some size. And that's what cultists will rely on. Then you have flak weave. This is not often talked about, but it's the standard for a lot of different forces. It may look like just a uniform, but this is actually a very thick, Kevlar-like material. It just lacks the outer covering of true flak armor. So it can protect you against shrapnel very well, it can protect you against lower caliber weapons, and it can also protect you, slightly from smaller caliber energy weapons, las pistols and things like that, or weaker power las guns. And the final one is genuine flak armor. This is that more rigid, covers the chest, shoulders, and back, and also under the arms. That whole plate system that we talked about in the previous slide, that is true flak armor, and that's going to be on the upper end of light body armor. So, pros and cons. Cheapness is definitely a pro. Whether you're talking about steel plates, woven material, or even the genuine top-of-the-line light flak armor, all of that stuff is relatively inexpensive compared with most body armor in the 41st millennium. And even the top-of-the-line stuff is intended to be replaceable. You're supposed to get hit once, it damages the underlayer, and then once you survive the battle, you go back to your quartermaster and say, here's my breastplate, it got hit by so-and-so weapon, can you toss me an extra? And they might have literally dozens, if not hundreds of extra sets to give you. So, remarkably cheap, easily replaceable, all advantages of light body armor. So, rigid versus soft versus steel. Now, this is going to be a back and forth among certain guard regiments. Some have certain opinions about this armor. And, of course, the Forces of Chaos have their own opinions. But this is kind of a back and forth. On the lowest possible end, the cheapest end, the really garbage quality, well, not garbage quality, but, lower end protection, you get steel body armor that is designed to be light. So, light steel body armor, like the sappy plate, like the protective 15mm plate that cultists might wear, it might protect you from a single las blast. At least it will save your life. It'll melt through, it'll hurt you a lot, you might even be crippled from it, but even then, you'll probably live, which is more than most cultists can ask for, which is why this armor is not universal amongst cultists, but where it is extant, it tends to be in forces that actually have a little bit more use for them. Cultists that tend to sign on with, like, Traitor Guard regiments or Chaos Space Marines, they'll go out of their way to give their cultists an extra layer of protection because they want those meat shields to survive more than a single hit. If a single sweep from a fully automatic weapon can kill all of your cultists, they're not of much value. And remember, the weapons that they tote are going to be of almost more value than the men themselves. So, steel body armor tends to cover the chest. It may cover the back, it may not, depending on the rig. And also, a very common thing within Chaos Forces specifically, though this also applies to PDFs, or rather, PDFs also use steel armor, but this specific fact tends to apply only to Chaos Cultists. Cultists tend to cover their faces, and they will often do that with a steel mask. Whether you're using the Blood Pact as an example, who have actual thick iron grotesques that cover up to and above their nose, only leaving their eyes visible, in addition to being attached to a steel helmet, or whether you're talking PDF, who might have just a steel bowl helmet like from World War II, they're going to have protection for the head and protection for the chest, if nothing else. Now, soft flak armor. That is kind of a confusing term. There is two types, in my opinion, of soft flak armor. On one hand, you have what this officer is wearing here, kind of that frock or overcoat of thick flak weave material. There might be a plate underneath that. It's not clear in the lore whether or not they can wear a breastplate underneath, even though they tend to wear shin guards or wrist guards or forearm guards or even shoulder pads or helmets. This thicker flak material can also be combined with what I like to call soft plates or soft patches. If you've ever seen level 2 body armor, where it's designed and rated for pistol protection, it's flexible. It uses panels of thick flak material. In 40k it's called flak material. In real life it's called Kevlar. So this thinner or thicker material that's like a patchwork of woven strands designed to either deplete the energy of energy weapons or to catch bullets. That is what you'll find sewn into soft armor in place of a rigid steel plate or in place of a rigid flak armor plate. Now, these patches can be placed anywhere. In light carapace, you'll see this far more often, where they have every single piece of the body covered in this thick, soft material that allows them a mix of flexibility and protection, from small arms at the very least. But in soft flak armor, or in light soft flak armor, you will see maybe an extra sewn-in breastplate, maybe a backplate, but that's probably going to be it. It's designed, again, to save the life of the user, not to keep them alive after multiple rounds have impacted them. So, again, you're going to see protection in the chest and protection in the back. You're likely not going to see it in the thighs and arms, even though the armor can extend there. If it's in the lighter configuration, it's not going to do so. Now, finally, the highest end of light body armor is the rigid flak plate, and this is what this lady is wearing here. Now, you might ask, how can I differentiate between rigid flak armor and soft flak armor, like what the guy in the previous slide was wearing? I would tell you it's very difficult, but the real difference is what the armor is coated with. Now, a standard flak plate, that soft flak plate that's probably in this officer's chest rig, is relatively light, but it also doesn't have any coating or covering or solid piece protecting it. Now, that can be set up in a way that it just amounts to a chest rig, something that covers the breast of the soldier and is just a thicker flak material, or the absolute top end of flak armor will be coated with something. Now, this ranges, but the absolute best version is what I think this lady is wearing, which is a light layer of ceramite, maybe 3 to 5 millimeters thick, backed by a thick coating of flak material. So it's as if you took that soft flak material that makes up flak weave, which is just used for uniforms in the Imperial Guard. For example, this entire uniform may be flak weave, but a soft protective plate might be placed over the soldier's chest in order to protect them. This heavier, rigid armor is harder to move in, but it combines that soft plate with a strike face. Now, anyone who's familiar with body armor will understand what a strike face is. It's essentially a kinetic barrier that breaks up any penetrating tip or depletes the momentum of a round before it strikes the soft material that is designed to dissipate the kinetic impact and catch the bullet. Now, this works against both kinetic and energy threats. Because it is made of ceramite or steel, the energy of an energy weapon will expend itself upon the outer layer and may not even penetrate, but it likely will. And even if it does penetrate, it will have to deal with a thick plate of flak weave. This is the type of armor that you could wear and genuinely take a few hits to the chest or shoulders without either needing to repair the armor or dying. So this stuff really does save your life. And it is equivalent, if not slightly superior, given the weapons of 40k, to our modern body armor. You know, it's not as thick, it's definitely lighter, which in my opinion is an advantage, because the Imperial Guardsman is expected to travel light, but it offers similar protection to the heavier breastplate options that exist in our universe. However, it also provides protection for the head, usually there's a helmet, in addition it will also protect the shoulders. In general, the Imperial Guard uniforms are made of flak weave, which in and of themselves are designed to be resistant to shrapnel, but soldiers who are more elite or regiments who are more wealthy will also spring to get that rigid armor because it is the highest level of light armor available that can really save a soldier's life. You know, it won't just save them from a grenade going off and getting hit with shrapnel. It won't save them from a glancing blow from a low-caliber weapon. It won't slow down a shot so that it only injures instead of killing them. It can genuinely give them a second chance at life and give them the advantage if they get hit first to not be dead in the first round. This matters a lot for the Imperial Guard because they are often outnumbered. And in comparison to their enemies, if they're better armored, better protected, and better trained, they can make up for the disadvantage of being outnumbered. So, moving on. Variable protection. This I would consider an advantage of light body armor. Patches, pads, plate, and rigs. Rigs hold material in place, so it would be something like the breastplate made of steel that you use in your body armor to place on top of your chest to protect you from low-caliber rounds and from shrapnel. Plates and pads, those would be more that soft... patches and pads, those would be more that soft material that gets placed inside of your uniform to protect you from kinetic rounds and to lessen the damage of las rounds. It's that soft, flak material that has been built up. It's, 2 to 3 times the thickness of your uniform, a little bit bulky like cotton armor, but it can do a lot because it's essentially a thick layer of Kevlar between you and shrapnel or bullets. There's a reason why I say that light body armor can be very effective against like pistol rounds, whether it's from las pistols or from auto pistols. They can resist bullets from a fair distance away. I wouldn't take a shot in the chest with just flak weave armor. It's probably going to penetrate. It might kill you. But if I have plates, if I have the ceramite face or the steel face rigid armor, I do not fear solid or laser weapons that are infantry weapons as much because I know that there's a solid chance that if they hit me in a vital location, it will be stopped by my armor. Whether it hurts me, whether it wounds me afterward, it probably won't be a lethal hit, and it is unlikely to be an incapacitating hit. So, save your life level of variable protection. Finally, standard materials, concealment, and built-in armor. For concealment and built-in armor, we go back to that light, soft material, but it also includes steel. A lot of cultists, that you see in the art, they don't seem well protected. They don't seem guarded. But you will also notice that a lot of them have rigs. They'll have backpacks. They'll have webbing. They'll have materials that hold things on their person. And it's very likely that one of those things that it holds on them is that light 10 to 15 millimeter steel plate. If a cultist has access to it, there's no reason to not carry around a little bit of body armor when it might make the difference between you getting killed by a las bolt and you surviving to kill your opponent. Now, That includes concealment and built-in armor. For the Flak weave, that's going to be more of your built-in armor where, a layer of my greatcoat or a layer of my uniform is actually built-in protection for me. But on the other side of things, we have standard materials. Flak weave can be made with a vast variety of materials. Any, hempen, flax, or even plastic material can be interwoven to make flak protection, in essentiality. And flak weave, the basic material of Imperial Guard uniforms, is so easy to produce that a feral world could probably do it. Which does also mean that, yes, a feral world could likely produce lighter versions of body armor, and they would be equivalent to what a Kriegsman or some other lower armor threshold guard regiment would have. But the standard materials kind of end when we get up to the higher level of light body armor. As mentioned, Imperial Guard rigid armor will likely have a ceramite coating. While ceramite isn't the rarest thing in the galaxy, it definitely is common enough that they can make tank armor out of it. So it is probably produced in the tons rather than the ounces or pounds. Like something like adamantium is probably produced in the ounces or pounds range from mining worlds and refined and forge worlds. But ceramite is much more common, to the point where it can be used in this upper level of light body armor as a coating. This acts as both a strike face, lowering the kinetic potential of rounds, but also as a thermal conductor, lowering the damage of laser weapons. And that is beyond what I would consider standard materials, but it is at least not such a unique and special material that it is impossible to make body armor out of. So, let's continue. Standards. Who makes what? Now, I've noted two pictures here. I would cut off light body armor at this 113, because after this point, there is protection that extends beyond what I would call light body armor. So, we'll talk about that in a second. And then down here are our lovely Imperial Navy men who are all clad in heavy flak weave. Who makes what? Imperial grade flak protection can be made by almost any planet that has a functioning industry. It's generally not chosen to be produced. Like, for example, a planet wouldn't go out of its way to say that we produce, this cheap body armor for the Imperium. You might say, why would they do that? It's military. It's very much worth it. It's not worth it because if anyone can make it, the value in the armor is actually very low. If nobody has a monopoly on it and there's no real specialties to be invoked, because the whole point is to keep the costs down, there's no real reason for lower level worlds to make it. While it can be produced by almost any world in the Imperium that has a decent amount of infrastructure and a decent amount of industry, it is not as common as you would think, and it tends to be made by planets that have an Imperial Guard regiment to support. So if there's a regiment on a world, say it's a recruiting world, and they raise regiments for the Imperial Guard, even if they don't make their own weapons for themselves, there's a solid chance that they will make body armor for the regiment, because it stimulates the economy. It allows them to produce something, and allows them to give more to the Imperium, because remember, most Imperial Guard recruitment worlds are recruitment worlds because they give them to the tithe. The Imperium takes them as taxes, essentially, in place of what the world produces, meaning that the world gets to keep and privately profit off of the actual things that it produces apart from military men. Now, that could include body armor, and most certainly if a planet is going to make Imperial Guard regiments, they are also going to want to produce that body armor. Same thing with licensed production. This lower level of body armor can come from anywhere. But there are patterns that are quote-unquote superior to others. Now, I would cite the Cadians as probably using some of the best light body armor in the Imperium, just because it's not only uniform in its size, weight, relative protection, and uniformity, but also because it's been produced at numbers that are absolutely unbelievable. Tens of millions of sets of body armor can provide for thousands of Imperial Guard regiments. You know, the entire Cadian regiment, you know, including all of the regiments that exist for it, all of them are equipped with at least flak armor. There are some regiments that don't get body armor whatsoever. They get uniforms. They get flak weave instead of body armor. The Cadians produce enough of this stuff that it can genuinely be given to every single guardsman who exists and bears the Cadian sigil. This implies a vast amount of licensed production. If it is that good of a design, and it is produced at that level, a Forge World could not manage it, for the sheer fact that there are limitations in quality versus speed that a Forge World can produce. So, licensed production is implied. Innovation and degradation. On the innovation side of things, flak armor is very flexible. It can make uniforms, it can make cloaks, it can be incorporated into different types of carapace armor. For example, light carapace armor and heavy flak armor, which have relatively similar protection levels, all use what is essentially just doubled up, increased, or modified versions of this light flak armor to create that greater level of protection, which we'll be talking about soon. Degradation-wise, it tends to be used for lots of different uniforms, and that's the only real disadvantage I could see with it, is that people tend to take it for granted, like, oh, it's a uniform, it's not meant for protection. These gentlemen down below here, these Imperial Navy officers, I would say that telling them that they're not protected in thick layers of flak weave would be remarkably stupid, because their very uniforms act as a form of body armor. Now, it's not protective enough to protect them from projectile weapons, but crude weapons, daggers, knives, melee weapons, blunt force weapons, blades, blowguns, bows, any of these low-tech options that are fairly common within the Imperium and might be used by rebels or cultists, they would most certainly be stymied by this thick, interwoven flak material that these Navy gentlemen are wearing. You know, not to mention the fact that if they were going up against actual flak armor, as in the case of these Cadian uniforms, they are much better. So, relative protection. I would say that it's very much an idea of it will save your life the first time. You know, infantry weapons, standard infantry weapons that hit flak armor are likely to destroy the flak armor and either injure or leave the wearer untouched. I'm not going to say entirely unwounded, but definitely not killed, definitely not incapacitated. It will save your life, this light armor, which is the reason why a lot of Imperial Guardsmen use it, because older, more veteran Imperial Guardsmen know that it isn't the protection that you're wearing that keeps you safe, it's your instincts. And when bad luck strikes, and you get hit by accident, or something unfortunate happens, you get ambushed, etc., the Imperial Guard flak armor will buy you the couple of seconds that you need to get your lasgun up and into position to resist the oncoming death that would otherwise have already killed you by shooting you once. So, it will save your life. That's the best thing that you can really say about it, because it does lack some of that upper level guarantees of protection. Moving on. Importance, users, and logistics. Let's go from left to right here. Actually, no, let's go from right to left. On one side, we have the absolute lowest level of light protection, the Armageddon Steel Legion. Now, it is questionable whether the Steel Legion wear a steel plate or a metal plate under their armor to complement their beautiful pumps, their boots, and their, you know, other armor, but it is at least obvious that their greatcoats, their overcoats, which are meant to protect them from Armageddon's harsh environment, are clearly made of thick flak weave. This will protect them from light caliber auto and stub rounds, you know, from pistols. It will slightly resist low gain laser weapons. Again, I wouldn't get shot in the chest with a las gun wearing only flak weave. You're probably gonna die, but a las pistol, it might save your life. And an auto pistol or a stub pistol, it will probably save your life if you're not at point blank range. You know, essentially consider yourself unarmored, but there's a chance that shrapnel or small arms won't kill you outright. Moving on, we have the standard Cadian. This is clearly that heavier, kind of, and this is in both of these pictures, that what I would call cut flak armor or coursed flak armor, where it has a material covering it over. In this case, I'm not sure whether it's ceramite or whether it's steel. My assumption is always that it's ceramite, because it is the basic standard for what is flak armor. Now, the shoulder blades on her armor are particularly thick. That's that extra layer of ceramite that essentially doubles the protection of the armor, and we'll get into that when we get into medium armor. But for right now, the light armor of the Cadians is going to be a thin layer of ceramite, a thick layer of flak material, and then their uniform. So it almost works as a strike face, a resistive material. How we use steel is how they use flak weave, or, flak material shellacked together with whatever adhesives you need to keep it into a rigid shape with those plates. And then at the very back is the flak weave uniform of the Imperial Guardsmen. This provides a greater level of protection than many versions of Imperial armor, but it is super important to the Imperial Guard because it keeps their soldiers alive. And the last one over here, this Son of Sek, over in the corner, our Chaos Gentleman, he is wearing what I would generally call ersatz flak armor. Now, ersatz, you'll hear me say that often. It's a German word which means exception or replacement, or in reality, it just means substitute. So it means switching out something that should be of high quality for something that is a replacement or a second line. So you could say ersatz las rifle would be a laslock. An ersatz bolt gun would be a autocannon. Something of that nature. Where it's a replacement of something good with something just as good, quote-unquote. This gentleman has 2 steel shoulder plates, which are clearly a lot thicker and heavier than standard flak armor, and he also has a steel breastplate, which is clearly thicker, the whole goal of which, why is he wearing all this raw steel? The goal is to mimic the capabilities of flak armor. That upper level of flak armor, those rigid plates, enough steel will mirror their effectiveness. Where he might not have a beautiful uniform or a flak weave protective underlayer, he compensates, Chaos Forces compensate, by having greater steel armor, greater thickness, stronger individuals, and a little bit more modularity. You can see he's got 2 knee covers, he's got a wrist protective piece, and generally the Sons of Sek will also have a helmet. And he even has armored toes. He has armored boots to theoretically protect him from, I don't know, the hot ground or something like that. Chaos uniforms don't need to make sense. But he's got a steel breastplate and steel shoulder plates. That's what really matters. He's essentially doing what most Chaos Forces do, which is try and emulate this light armor pattern by any means necessary. Quite often that means resorting to much more brutish and low quality and even replacement variants of the armor. But, if it does the trick, if it saves your life, really, light armor is about giving you a second chance. If you make a mistake, if you get ambushed, if you get outflanked, if you have something unfortunate happen, flak armor will keep you from dying for long enough that a good soldier will be able to make up the difference. So that's the goal with Chaos and Guardsmen. PDFs tend to take what Chaos does and do it even on the more cheap. We're talking even feral world level plates of armor, something like a buff coat or chainmail or ring mail or any type of, proto-imperial or semi-archaic weapon or armor patterns might be employed by PDFs. These will be on PDFs that generally don't have access to high technology. It would be a PDF that still uses like medieval style warfare. Since Planetary Defense Forces can get that degraded, technically that's still light armor. It does protect you from low caliber bullets like all the rest of it does. It is inferior, however. It is definitely inferior because it's not only more expensive for them to make, it is also less protective against modern weapons, and it is outright just going to be heavier than even the Chaos version of making thick plates that can cover you and save your life. So, the PDF tend to get less value out of it because all of their locally produced stuff is going to be of lower quality. The Guardsman and Chaos, however, it's of great use. This is one thing I wanted to mention as well. There's really a artistry bias against showing cultists with body armor, but in the modern day, we have many examples of even third-line troops, and I hate to say this, but genuinely militia-style militaries will provide, if not provide body armor, will provide protection. Helmets, almost always, will provide breastplates or sappy plates. These are almost universally identified as ways to keep soldiers alive for longer and ways to save their lives for better things. I could not imagine a cult, even one that only has, a lot of trash units, not equipping a single elite or better or superior force with body armor to make that distinction between the low-level chaff that go out and essentially are just, meat slaves or meat shields, and the ones who are enforcers, the ones who are expected to hold discipline or to hold the line. The best example of this that I can think of are the Disciples of Zaphen from the Siege of Rax. The Disciples of Zaphen get the best options out of the Imperial armories on Vrax, and they universally wear either heavy flak armor, which is a medium style of protection, not light, or they will wear carapace, light carapace, and even the absolute meanest of them will get their hands on some sort of body armor because they know that it will save their life. And they know that they need to survive to the next fight to carry on their veterancy, their experience, and their better weapons into the next fight. And I could not see cultists not going after Imperial Guard flak or some relative equivalent in most cases in order to keep themselves alive. So, moving on and finishing up. This is the first of 2 videos. I'm probably not going to release the next one for a couple of days. You guys have been absolutely great. I really appreciate all the feedback. I'm going to incorporate it in videos. You guys are so good. I'm going to keep trucking on. Again, light body armor and body armor in general is one of my really big things that I like to harp on. I don't like the idea that protection in the Imperium is just useless, and I tend to go for, protection exists for a reason. Why equip them with it if it didn't matter? And this also applies for Chaos. All of this will come to fruition, and I will finish up another video on medium and heavy body armor, and then I will do the oh-so-vaunted and much-appreciated Bolter video coming up soon. So stick with me, and I wish you all a lovely and happy good night.